have been called upon by divine beings to pass along, for this reason, several things to everyone in this world. Each of what I am about to disclose is a higher, closely guarded secret, and these are being shared to provide a true picture of affairs and to give people another chance at salvation. First is the question of how humankind came about. From the dawn of its creation to its final days, the universe has gone through an exceptionally long passage of time consisting of 4 stages: formation, stasis, degeneration, and destruction. When the final point of the destruction stage is reached, the complete obliteration of everything in the greater cosmic body, which includes the universe in which we exist, takes place instantaneously, and all living things perish. When a person dies, it is just a matter of his physical body declining and breaking down, while his true soul, which is who he really is, and which does not die with the passing of his physical body, will continue on in a next life, being reborn. So just as the universe goes through formation, stasis, degeneration, and destruction, so too do human beings go through birth, aging, illness, and death. These are laws of the universe, to which even higher beings are subject. Only the time span is longer, with the process being more drawn out in proportion to how great the beings are. Life and death are not painful for them, and they remain cognizant throughout these processes. To them, it is as if but changing outfits. Put differently, normally lives do not really die. But when the universe and the cosmos disintegrate at the final stage of the formation, stasis, degeneration, destruction process, however, lives will not be reborn, and there will be no more existence of life or matter, with all turning to dust and there being only emptiness. Currently, the human world is experiencing the last period in the destruction phase of the formation, stasis, degeneration, destruction progression. Everything has changed for the worse in these end times, as fated, and destruction is thus imminent. And it is for this reason that the world is so troubled. Good thoughts are rare, people's minds have become twisted, debauchery and drug abuse are rampant, and people subscribe to atheism. These are inevitable in the last stage of the cosmos, and bespeak of the time at which we have arrived. The Creator cherishes all of the heavenly beings that exist, as well as all of the lives that are good and kind, and all of the glorious creations in the cosmos. So at the beginning of the degeneration stage, he led a number of divine beings to the outermost plane of the cosmic body, known generally as that which is outside the divine realm, a place where there are no divine beings, and created Earth. But Earth hadn't the capacity to exist independently. It needed for there to be a corresponding cosmic structure with which it could form a circulatory system involving life and matter. For this reason, the Creator made a larger expanse outside of the Earth, which higher beings refer to as the 3 realms. Before the final time of salvation would arrive, no higher beings, however great, were to be allowed to enter this expanse without the Creator's permission. The expanse of the 3 realms comprises 3 major realms. The realm of desire, Yi, which is made up of the lives on this earth, including humankind. A second realm, the realm of likings, Se, which is above it, and a third realm further above, known as the realm without likings, Wu Se. Each successive realm is higher and more glorious than that below it, though none can compare to the divine realm or the many heavenly kingdoms still higher. The heaven that people normally refer to is in fact within either the realm of likings or the realm without likings within the 3 realms. Each of the 3 realms has 10 planes within it, making for a total of 33 planes in all, if you include the 3 realms themselves. Human beings reside in the realm of desire, and this is the lowest of all planes with the worst environment. Life is painful and short here, but more dreadful still is the fact that in the human world, few of the things people take to be truths are actually valid. What human beings hold to be true is on the whole considered the opposite in the larger universe, but an exception is the higher truths that holy beings have taught to man. For example, the divine does not consider it right for whomever is victorious in battle to become ruler, but territory to be seized by military force, or for the powerful to be seen as heroes, since killing and forcefully taking from others are involved. That is not the way of the universe, nor how higher beings go about things. Yet in the human world, these are inevitable and accepted. Those are the ways of the human world, but they are contrary to the ways of the universe. Thus, if a person wishes to return to heaven, he must follow true, higher laws and work on himself. Some people are content when they are doing a bit better in life than others, but such people are only comparing themselves with other human beings within this human realm, when everyone here is in fact living in what is considered to be the trash bin of the universe. The
jazz story, or have, your drag queens come in and read the jazz story if you want to. Or you could just quietly read books. You don't even bring attention to them. If you're writing a math sheet, write a math sheet and put a picture of someone on there who's like, a non-binary, maybe looking kind of person.
That's Michael Smith, a world languages teacher of Long Island, one of Assistant Superintendent David Casamento's teachers who works in the East Meadow School District.
I decide to come in with makeup and bigger shoulder pads. Am I really doing drag? Am I just being me? Where does the line fall? So I think that introduction of it really be as simple as saying, hey, we're going to read a book from Dr. Seuss, and here's a quote from Martin Luther King, and here's a quote from RuPaul, and just having little kind of drops of exposure to somebody's upbringing. And that's what settles into our psyche as what normalcy is, right? More exposure. And people that have extreme culture shock or people that are isolated and aren't exposed to somebody who's different. You grow up in New York, you see, you walk down the street, you see 74 different kinds of people over time.
I remember the first time I went swimming after my top surgery. It was awesome. I never swam before that. I never went to the beach. So those things I would choose to not do in navigating my situation so that I felt most comfortable to me. And I was working very physical jobs at that time. I spent about 6 years saving up for my top surgery because it wasn't covered by health insurance back then. And binding and working physical jobs, saving money, traveling for surgery. I traveled to San Francisco, and there were a lot of barriers at the time, which is why I'm so grateful with Northwell Health and the development of health systems on Long Island. It's so encouraging to see the change that we're kind of in the middle of that change. We're in that period of history where things are progressing.
And so one of the courses that I was teaching was reaching out to our gay and transgender students. And these kids just coming up to me, I just want to share with you that I identify as trans, and I really prefer this, please don't tell home. And I didn't realize how many kids were like this. So those are the subtle things that I think make the ripples that make waves. That class, because that was the class that I was like, let's watch some drag, let's talk about it, let's have fun. But the people that do teach, it's great. It's Teacher Education Institute, and they have reaching out to our gay transgender students. It's affordable bloggers as well. So somebody who's really indifferent about their identity, where they are, and kind of growing up,
is making sure that lamb is well armed to protest that vote. And so what we have to do is make sure young lambs who are often marginalized are well armed with intellect and diplomacy and education, not any armed with violence or bullets or guns or anything like that. You would never win the war with that kind of mentality. It has to be about educating the mind. The most powerful weapon ever known in the world is the muscle inside your head.
Dr. Carson, this is about public education. And in your chapters, you talk about morality. We talk about the fact that some of the kids lack the basics. Sometimes they cannot always understand what they're reading because sometimes they cannot see. That health is a big part of this also.
There's so many facets. I talk about health, I talk about faith, I talk about community involvement, I talk about family, the family structure, and how we are able to pass on issues of morality, of right and wrong. So often, kids are not taught that there is something that's right versus something that's wrong. It's just what feels good to you. And I think that's perhaps where we have gone somewhat astray. You know, it really started, I think, several decades ago when somehow we came to the conclusion that there was no room in the classroom for teaching morality. You know, 10 Commandments, terrible. You can't put that up in school. But really, what is wrong with thou shalt not kill? What's wrong with thou shalt not steal? Thou shalt not commit adultery? Thou shalt not envy? Thou shalt not lie? What's wrong with that? Why wouldn't we teach people things like that? And when we don't, we look and see what happens. But the principal thing we need to teach people is that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. We need to start empowering people with the can-do attitude, not with the what can you do for me attitude. And, you know, there are lots of stories, lots of ways to empower people. You know, when I was a kid, you know, I kind of fell into that victim mentality until I started reading. And I started reading about scientists and explorers and entrepreneurs. And all of a sudden, you know, it sort of dawned on me, you know, you're the person who really gets to decide whether you're going to learn all this stuff or you're going to put effort into it. I have to admit.
Hold that point. Our new book, Crisis in the Classroom, Dr. Carson, Attorney Crump, pick up from where you were.
I have to admit that I was not one who was particularly interested in school because I didn't think I was a good student. And I certainly didn't want to read. But as I started reading, things started changing. I'm looking at words all the time. Suddenly I learned how to spell. I'm not the first one to sit down with a spelling bee. I learned grammar and syntax. All of a sudden, I'm sort of in the mainstream. And then soon after that, zoom to the top because I went far beyond what was required in the classroom, recognizing that the more I knew, the more power I had, the more options that I had. And those are the kinds of things that are taught to a good student. You seldom will find a successful person who cannot point to a teacher who inspired them and played a significant role in their life. And those are the kinds of things that we have to start thinking about in our public education system. How do we empower the teachers to be able to actually teach, not to be strangled and saddled with you must do this and you must do that. We have some very innovative and creative people who go into teaching. And we need to be looking at the results that they achieve, not whether they check A, B, C, and D, but how are their students doing?
What impact are you hoping that the publication of this book will have, Attorney Crump?
Well, the biggest hope I have for this book is that thought leaders and thinkers alike, minds will be expanded about how we address this crisis. First, we have to admit there's a crisis. Some people like to look the other way. We would never solve the problem by looking the other way. We would never solve the problem by attacking one another. What we have to do is sit down at the table and try to figure out what is the solution. It's one thing to talk about the problem, but we got to talk about solutions too. And I believe solutions start with accountability. Once you start saying everybody is going to be accountable, the teachers, the students, the parents, the administrators, the legislators, everybody, we're going to take accountability for how can we avert this crisis situation that we keep losing children to every day, every year. We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues.
Center. Investigators say they've discovered even more victims than originally known. The facility is meant to be a safe haven for abused, neglected, and abandoned children. Police say 21-year-old Caleb Randolph had inappropriate sexual contact with at least 3 children at the Rainbow House in Jonesboro. Investigators say the center's executive director, Randolph's mom, tried to cover it up. According to authorities, at least 2 other employees failed to report what they knew.
We found that their behavior was criminal, greed, unprofessional, negligent, and not in the best interest of the juveniles. It was like watching a Netflix series unfold right before our eyes.
Detectives launched their investigation after an anonymous tip. They asked any other victims to come forward. The DeKalb County CEO
and killed 3 students and 3 teachers who were in their 60s before officers arrived and killed her.
Police say Hale had a manifesto and maps of the school's entry points. A few hours ago, President Biden sent his condolences to the families impacted and called on Congress to do more to stop gun violence.
It's heartbreaking, a family's worst nightmare. And we have to do more to stop gun violence. It's ripping our communities apart, ripping the soul of this nation.
Tonight, investigators say Hale attended the school several years ago.
Police in Cobb County are investigating the discovery of a dead body at a homeless encampment overnight. Authorities say fire crews responded to a call around 1 o'clock in the morning at the encampment located near I-75 and Ernest Barrett Drive. After putting the fire out in a burning tent, firefighters found a body inside. So far, investigators have not ruled out foul play. Anyone with information is asked to contact police.
A Gwinnett County man is behind bars after police say he killed his girlfriend and burned her body. According to the Gwinnett County Police Department, 29-year-old Jahir Sagahon is accused of murdering Ruby Nava. Officers conducted a welfare check last week after she went missing. Police then interrogated Jahir, who confessed that he strangled her during an argument. He then drove her body to Oglethorpe County and burned her inside the vehicle. He is now facing multiple charges as a result.
Served as the deputy drug czar under President Bill Clinton, California has been trying to pass stricter laws to deal with fentanyl, but the bill died in the Public Safety Committee over the past couple of years.
The purpose is to keep other people from dying. And young people sometimes think they're immortal. They think, oh, one pill's not going to hurt me. Well, one pill can kill you. There's not a community in California that's not impacted by fentanyl right now.
I'm Siamai Kurami. Welcome to California Insider. Tom, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. We have a lot of important subjects to discuss.
Yeah, we want to talk to you about fentanyl, and we've been covering homelessness a lot on this show, and a lot of our guests have been telling us that fentanyl is now a big cause of people in the street overdosing, dying. Can you tell us more about what's going on with fentanyl?
Sure. Well, you're right. Fentanyl affects everyone, and sometimes folks who become addicted to certain substances, they become homeless, and so, or homeless people, in order to relieve their situation, may take something like oxycodone or some other painkiller that actually is laced with fentanyl. But here in Orange County and all around California, fentanyl doesn't particularly impact one demographic necessarily. It is the largest killer. Fentanyl right now is the largest killer of individuals between the ages of 18 and 45. Exceeds car accidents, exceeds all other sources, all of the causes of death.
How does that happen? Do people want to get into it, or how do people?
Well, the reason for the large number of deaths is that often certain drugs, methamphetamine, oxycodone, other things, are laced with fentanyl, and the user doesn't want to kill themselves. They just don't know that fentanyl is incorporated into the drug, and as a consequence, they'll take it. And fentanyl is very, very, very powerful. It's 100 times more powerful, for example, than morphine. And so just taking one pill can kill you. And young people sometimes think they're immortal. They think, oh, one pill is not going to hurt me. Well, one pill can kill you.
Now, do the dealers not tell them? How does that happen?
I think it's all sorts of things. I think sometimes the dealers don't know.
Sometimes the dealers do know and don't care. The manufacturer may cut in fentanyl, may include fentanyl in the drug because it's not expensive to make and it is very, very, very potent. And so there's a variety of issues that surround fentanyl distribution.
Can you explain to us how does all this work? So, you have the drug dealers, some of them not know it, some of them may know it. And how does this whole process work?
Fentanyl can be manufactured almost anywhere. I just talked to the mayor of San Francisco yesterday, told me that fentanyl is being manufactured in her city. Most of the fentanyl here coming in the United States right now is manufactured in Mexico. It's not that expensive to make. You can get a pill making machine and you have someone who's somewhat sophisticated in chemistry and they can put together either a fentanyl pill or a pill that someone thinks is, for example, methamphetamine that is laced or cut with fentanyl. And it comes across the border, or it can be manufactured here, but lots of it comes in the United States, either through or around the border, and then it's distributed here. It's distributed in the same way that other drugs have been distributed, but the difference is that it's not like marijuana. Marijuana, takes a large, it's large in terms of volume, and is very, very small, very, very small. So it's much easier to import in the United States.
So it's essentially seems like it's easier to make, it's cheaper, and it's easier to transport.
Right, and that's why it is such a difficult drug to get a hold of in terms of law enforcement. Such a difficult drug to cut the supply. Law enforcement has a difficult time tracking down both the suppliers as well as the distributors. So,
this episode is sponsored by Birch Gold.
Government is sensitive to where opportunities lie, advantages and disadvantages lie. Everything has a strategic impact and a reason we should be protecting it. But really, basically, this started when I was in Beijing in 2011. The Mandian Report, the very first one, APT1, talked about a PLA organization in Shanghai that was, stealing American intellectual property on the behalf of the Chinese government. This is a government effort to undermine the American economy. And this has been going nonstop ever since. We then should recognize that, there's a thief at the door, and we need to deadbolt the door, right? Because they're coming in to steal our stuff. These aren't friendly software apps and stuff like that. They all have ulterior motives. Xi Jinping has said as much in his many programs. So we have to help the American people understand that the Chinese people are great. We love the Chinese people and culture, but the Communist Party means us harm, seeks to dominate, wants to change the system to look more like what it is in the PRC than what we have in our free and open societies, and we shouldn't allow that.
General, you mentioned information in terms of AI and especially machine learning, and it seems some of the trends that are on TikTok or make their way over to Instagram have a lot to do with, say, maybe someone's baby picture and then what they look like now. And, it seems very sweet, whatever, seeing people grow, but some experts are noting it's like that is helping the machine learn how to recognize how people change through the years. And then what could that kind of learning be used for, especially in a war, potentially?
So my data was stolen as part of the OPM hack back in 2014 or 15, as was millions of other government people. From that information, biological information, simply health issues, you can use that to hold people hostage. You can use that as leverage to get people to do what they don't want to do. You can also build networks from that information and figure out that I talked to these 4 people. And then you can monitor their accounts. And then from there, you can build a story of what we talk about. Things that we do related to national security, related to economics, things we buy. How about simple economics? Having an understanding of what sorts of things I like to buy, and then using that as leverage to withhold those supply chain information things, or the difficulty we had with supply chains. Every bit of this gives the PRC a hammer, a lever that they can hit us over the head with, that we don't get in reverse because of the Great Firewall. Again, we should not allow the adversary to keep punching us while we simply hold our hands behind our back because our system doesn't allow us to defend ourselves. We should defend ourselves. And If from that we come to an accommodation or an agreement with the PRC that we're going to allow these things to go one by one to rebuild the relationship, then that's fine.
And say to themselves, the world loves a bad guy. And then start the day carrying out such aberrant and stomach-churning behavior that even Russia says, oh dear me. Let's forget that for a second. China created a biological weapon and set it loose on the world, then threatened Japan, Canada, Australia, and a host of other nations that do not wish to be evil. Let's try to forget that they almost always have been on the wrong side of history. Now, let's sit back and soak in the fact that China is now harvesting organs from prisoners. Murder is already punishable by death in China, so are we talking misdemeanors here? I steal a bike and you rip out my kidney? Look like we got ourselves a jaywalker.
Are flexing their military muscles as American troops begin joint exercises on a nuclear-powered aircraft just hours after North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles in protest of the U.S.'s military cooperation with South Korea. This is the 7th missile test this month, underscoring the heightening tensions in the region as both the North's weapons test and the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises have intensified a cycle of tit for tat. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the 2 North Korean missiles were fired from a western inland area south of the North Korean capital of Pyongyang before landing in the sea. Moving now over to the ongoing war in Ukraine, President Zelensky is calling for an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council following a new announcement from Russia that tactical nuclear weapons will be stationed in neighboring Belarus. NATO has condemned the move, blasting it as, quote, dangerous and irresponsible. Meanwhile, the European Union has warned Belarus against hosting Russian nuclear weapons, saying it was an irresponsible escalation and threat to European security. Russia has already stationed several nuclear-capable fighter jets in Belarus. It says doing so doesn't violate any nuclear treaties, as the U.S. does the same thing with its European allies. Now to Israel, where weeks of ongoing protests took a new turn Sunday after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fired his outspoken defense minister. Tens of thousands poured into the streets of cities across the country in a spontaneous outburst of anger against the Israeli leader's decision. A main highway was blocked, large bonfires were lit, and police scuffled with protesters who gathered outside Netanyahu's private home in Jerusalem. Coalition leaders are meeting this morning following calls from Israel's president to stop lawmaking until political backlash